Recording in progress.
Sure. I'm Alex. Legal Street. The
city council, is that still got to be within that same period, or once it's done that, then we don't really care? Or
I think what you're referring to is if a developer invokes it under state law, the ripcord provision,
right,
that to force it to move forward, and you know, if it's being stalled or whatever. But typically, when it's ready, it comes right to you, and you generally, unless very rare circumstances, you usually have taken action, public hearing, consideration, and action on the same meeting. So there's no chance anybody could really say that you're slowing the process down, right? And in that rare instance, or one at least, where it needed the second meeting to kind of get new information or finish talking about it, that's probably easily defendable. But in theory, if the planning commission was stalling, slowing something down, they could pull the ripcord. It's in somewhere in Ludlow.
So that's just an option. That's not a.
Yeah, it's not an automatic thing. It's only if they invoke the option. In the close to 8 years I've been here, I don't think anybody's ever invoked it. Somebody said that they were considering it, but never did it. That's what I remember.
But if it is denied, then they have to wait 1 year, and then they have to pay all of the fees back again and all that kind of stuff, right?
Significantly different.
Right. If they like add another bunch of property in, so now it's twice the size of the original application or whatever.
So
yeah, applying for it completely different. So
less dense.
Yeah, change the density, something that makes it dramatic or significantly different, I think is the experience.
Duncan, do you want additional questions or comments about the bylaws now or in the regular meeting?
I'd say if we have time for them now, maybe just finish that process.
Here are two things that I might bring up now. All right. First one is pretty simple. I think it's on page 1, item number 2. Might irrelevant, really, but might help just to state there that at the end of sentence, number 2 sentence, to state have per section D or refer them to section D, because that's where the general directions.
Yeah, I should have put line numbers on here. So on the first page, and it's A1 or A2? A2.
Just make a reference there to section D, which is where the general directions for meetings are found.
Okay. So at the end of A2, just reference section D. Capital D. Yeah, that's
And on page
good internal reference.
Page what? Page 2. 7D. This is just a question out of curiosity. How long are you supposed to, is the planning commission supposed to retain records?
It's permanent.
Yeah, yeah. So you're on 7C. 7C. Yeah, and there's a records retention schedule that we have at the state level, applies to cities, and there's certain types of records, just general everyday records that need to be kept for 7 years or 10 years. But when it comes to minutes of meetings of the city council and planning commission, then it's forever.
I'm just curious. I know that in hospitals, it's records retention is a huge issue and a huge problem. So I just what it was here.
Yeah, in fact, I used to work for the city of Perry, and they had their 100-year anniversary when I was there. So they've probably been a city now for 10 years. But it was the funnest book that they had was their original book of minutes. They were handwritten in one of those big books. And I read the minutes for like the first 5 or 6 council meetings. And it was really cool. It was really, really cool. And so I think even just for historical purposes, it's kind of
Yes, because even when I was working for the hospital, when Cottonwood Hospital first opened up, I come across their maternity book, and everything was handwritten, but it literally had the first birth in the hospital all the way to, I can't remember what year it was, but it was kind of interesting to see how far things have changed, even from, my, well, I should say my era, but when I was there, and compared to when the births and stuff.
Yeah, it's cool. And with minutes, one of the cool things that we have state archives, and they're willing to come in and scan any documents, right? And I think we have, I would assume, do we have all of our planning commission minutes to state archives? Probably most of them.
No,
So we could do. I know
scanned. We have them scanned. We have them electronic, and
but at least we have our own backup scans or copies, right? It's something we're really careful with anyway. Whatever level we want, more than one level, just on one computer, we back them up, another computer, extra hard drive, and maybe some stuff goes to state archives, whatever. Yeah, minutes are very, very important. The way of proving that something happened, right? Yeah. So, any other questions? Okay, so maybe during the main meeting, I'll bring up that internal reference that you mentioned, and that's all I had as first.
Very good, thank you. Anything else, we'll adjourn here and move into the council chambers. Okay.
Yeah, just real quick. So kind of the main item before you guys tonight is we're considering a rezone for property that's on the north side of Gardner Lane, about halfway between 2200 West and Redwood Road. That's about 16 acres worth of property. So we're looking at going from an A1, which is an agricultural zone, to an R18 zone. So it's consistent with the land use map, so there's no future land use map amendments. It's just a straight R18 zone, so there's no planned community or development plan that needs to be considered. That's about it.
and it's similar to the surrounding area, R18.
For the most part, yeah, and I'll go over that in more detail.
There's some R12s and R10s.
Yeah, it's kind of a mix. So yeah, everything from agricultural to yeah,
I remember it is consistent with the land use. Has this come before the council before? No.
No, it's not required to, because they're not amending the future land use maps. But it will, the next step is to go to the council for new business and then for
Brian to your transportation.
I was more worried about water.
It's fully serviceable.
Okay, because I noticed it changed the units from.
yeah, so with that, it was kind of a change that we ran into. If you remember, some of you remember, we had updated the future land use map back in June, and as part of that, we kind of overhauled the land uses. So what we did is we took away the very high density designation and just kind of shifted the density. We didn't change the densities, we just kind of shifted them by the name. Problem is we didn't change the water master plan at the same time. So the water master plan is now reflecting densities that are less than what. So with the new future land use map, basically we're getting less ERCs than what should have been in the original, which is not.
So the original should have been less.
Yeah, so basically what we need to do is amend the water master plan and just change that table and just shift those land.
Because that was a huge concern when I saw it jump from 88 to 50.
Mm-hmm.
Go, whoa.
Yeah, and we caught that kind of at the pre-app and we're like, wait a second.
Okay. So I just wanted to make sure that that wasn't one of, because I remember one of the things that we came up with, I do believe last year, is to approve any of the zone changes, they had to have so much water and sewer designated so that they wouldn't have to have some issues like has happened in the past where
Yep, exactly.
we run out of water or we run out of sewer problems.
Talked to Greg Davenport this morning. Another thing to bear in mind is that Brandon, this is gonna happen. UDOT is going to put a traffic signal occur there later.
It needs it.
Right now, it's in the planning design phase and they're looking for funding.
Now, also, Duncan, just as a disclosure, Steve Pearson, who used to own that property, was a dear friend of mine before he passed. I have no interest in it other than he was a friend. So
Yeah, and personal friendship issues are not ethical issues under state law. You don't have any financial interest, right? Yeah, you don't
him
have
and
any,
his brother.
you don't have any financial
Oh, no.
interest, right? So yeah, so there's
No, he didn't leave me anything in his will.
Oh,
Not even a little bit. Not even a cow or a horse or.
How good of a friend was he?
He actually raised cattle and horses, so, and he was big into cattle. Like, in fact, we used to have coffee a lot. And I kept telling him his cattle business was losing money. And it was before he passed away, but that was his joy.
You adjourned. Council chambers.
How could you believe you money?
Well, you could have left me a cow.
I know, I was gonna say, a cow at least.
Oh, a side of beef would be worth something.
This is the planning commission meeting for March 5th. All commissioners are present with the exception of Commissioner Allen. And have people in the audience. We appreciate you being here. Thank you. I'm assuming we'll hear from some of you later on. The first item on the agenda is the consent calendar item. The only item on the consent calendar is to approve the minutes for the February 20th meeting. I do have one question on the minutes before we go to that motion. On page 8, under item 6, second paragraph, there was a discussion regarding how if an inverse motion would have been promoted. Is inverse the proper word there, or would it be adverse motion? Okay, all right, we're good then. Are there any other questions or comments about the minutes? Okay, then we'll entertain a motion to approve them.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting.
Commissioner Thomas?
I'll second that.
You need to get your microphone closer to your, they can't hear you. You're too soft spoken.
Sorry. Motion has been made by Commissioner Hatch, seconded by Commissioner Thomas to approve the minutes of the previous meeting. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, which I've already lost, is bylaws. And we'll turn the time over to Mr. Murray for this item.
Okay, so at your last meeting, we did discuss the bylaws. Not sure what's causing the feedback. But at your last meeting, you did discuss the bylaws, and there were some red line changes that were discussed in depth. That's what we've been calling option A. Option A was placed in your packet again for today. Most of those changes were for internal references and consistent use of terms. Should I wait or should I see if we can get a grip on the feedback? Yeah, I'll wait.
Try again.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, and just so the public knows that we're still new in this building, getting used to the new technology. We got a great IT team to kind of work out the kinks as we're getting started back in this building, and so hopefully you can hear us. But as I was starting to explain, the bylaws or rules of procedure are those rules that govern how you conduct meetings, right? And there are some basic rules under state law. There's some basic rules in our city code, but city code allows you as the planning commission to flesh out additional rules that are consistent with those rules. Basically just the procedures and how meetings are conducted and motions and all of those kinds of things. And your rules, of course, you've kept up to date through the years and made little changes here and there. This time, with this process that was started at your last meeting, most of these changes are, as you remember, not substantive. They are for internal reference, consistent use of terms, and so forth. There are a couple of substantive changes. One is that in a pre-meeting that would require the quorum to conduct a pre-meeting is only 3 instead of 4 that you have as your quorum requirement in the main meeting. State law and city code allows for that as long as it's specifically in your rules. The other main substantive change is
in the additional option B that you have for this meeting. At the last meeting, you got talking about tie votes and unapproved failed votes. And that is one additional set of substantive changes. The tied vote provisions, you already looked at your last meeting. You're apparently happy with those. Since there was a recommended change to the failed vote procedures, we came up with an option B to be considered for that. We talked about that during the pre-meeting, but essentially there's a special procedure if you're ever in a situation where it's not a tie vote, but you haven't been able to pass an approved vote that passed by by a majority of those present, then this would allow you the opportunity to have one final vote, so to speak, as to whether it was on the one hand, it would be a binary choice of either denying the application or giving a negative recommendation, or on the other hand, the other choice or that you could vote on in that special vote would be to continue the application to the next meeting. And my understanding is the reason for these rule choices is to make sure that something that there's some action to propel or move the application forward, right? We don't want to be stuck in limbo. It needs to be clear: is that application approved? Is it denied? Is it continued to the next meeting? And of course, procedural motions are always possible if you need more information. Or if there's some other reason, you can pick a date in the future and make a procedural motion that that application come back within 30 days, 90 days, or whatever you indicate in your motion. So that's a fair summation of the substantive changes. And like I say, most of the other changes were merely procedural. You had some other discussion in the pre-meeting today. One last change that came up during that discussion was in paragraph A2, where it talks about the chair presiding at planning commission meetings. There's one sentence there already that says the chair shall preside at all meetings of the planning commission and shall provide general direction for the meetings. And my understanding is if you want to add a second sentence that says see section D, parenthesis, procedure dash order and decorum, and parenthesis, for the sequence of agenda items during a planning commission meeting. Does that adequately sum up what you wanted? Okay. So with that, I don't think you had any other additional changes that you are considering, unless more come up right now during this agenda item. But with that, and where we've previously discussed it, that's all I have for my presentation now, unless you have any other questions for me.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, comments, concerns? Okay. Commissioner Hatch.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the bylaws that have been presented today. Option B is my preference.
And were you motioning to add in the additional language regarding paragraph A2? Oh.
Yes.
Are we clear? Commissioner Thomas.
I'll second that motion.
A motion by Commissioner Hatch, second by Commissioner Thomas. All in favor? Aye. Are there any opposed? The vote is unanimous. We will next proceed to item number 3, public hearings with Planning Commission recommendation to the City Council for final action. Pearson Farms rezone 1996 and 1986 West Gardner Lane, rezone 16.36 acres from A1 agriculture zone to R18 single family residential 8,000 square foot minimum lots zone. The applicant is MacArthur Homes and represented by John Gassman. Would you like to step to that microphone, please? and offer your presentation.
All right. So I'm John Gassman with MacArthur Homes. There, perfect. Let me just first start by just mentioning a couple things. I'll keep this brief. Some of you may or may not be familiar with MacArthur Homes. We've been around for about 30 years, 28 plus of which I've been with the company. We're not a big company. We shoot to about 150 homes a year. And in those 30 years, we have developed and built homes for about 700 families in West Jordan, which we're very proud of. A couple of those subdivisions, let me just make mention of, because they're most similar to what we would like to do here on the Pearson property. One is going back to 2001. We did the Bateman Farm subdivision over on 13th West and about 70th South, where the Bateman family had their dairy farm. They then moved their dairy operation to Levan, and we went in and put about 70, I think it was 77 or 79 lots, very similar in size to what we're talking about here. I think they were 8,000 foot minimums. For those of you who might be familiar with that, I drove through there a couple of weeks ago, and it's still a great subdivision to this day. More recently, we did the Boulder Ranch subdivision out on 90th South and Mountain View Corridor, which was kind of purchased and entitled by the Mischel family. Land that was purchased from the Boys Ranch. We worked closely with the Mischels and the Boys Ranch and the LDS Church to do that 81 lot subdivision, which also I think turned out great. So that's kind of what we're looking to do here, hoping we can do it. We're excited to have another opportunity to be building in West Jordan right here in our backyard. Our office is just down the street in South Jordan. So, let me first just quickly address, as we look at the 5 criteria to justify a zone change. It's a 15-acre piece and a 1-acre piece combined. It was originally one parcel owned by Stephen Pearson. It's in the family trust now. He has two living daughters, Emily Sosa and Heather Moore. Emily is the trustee, so she's the one we deal mostly with. She was unable to be here tonight. Their family's on vacation. And Heather lives up in Preston, Idaho. So, and a couple of years ago, Emily and her husband Corey peeled off the 1-acre piece. They're currently, if you on the photo there, you see the one house on the right is a home that they are building. Their hope was down the road they would subdivide that into 3 lots. And then the existing Pearson home is on the left there. So this is looking at where the entrance of the subdivision would be from the south. We are wanting to, our agreement with the Sosas is that we would rezone their piece as well and incorporate that into this development and include it as part of our development. And so with their piece added in, we end up, you'll see the concept, you may have already seen it, see it in a minute, we end up with about 55 lots. So in looking at the 5 criteria, if we can just scroll through those pictures. So this is looking at the subject property from the north. And then the last one here is just looking from the canal, looking east with the existing subdivision to the north, kind of on the left-hand side there. It is obviously a beautiful piece of property that we're excited to have this opportunity. So, all right, Mark, if you go to the vicinity map. So this is where we're talking about. It's on Gardner Lane at about 1950 West. Between Redwood Road and 2200 West. In looking at those 5 criteria, the surrounding homes, the land use map, I guess, first of all, calls for low density, single family, which it's surrounded mostly by R18, R110, and R112 zoning, which obviously the R18 is allowed in this zone. You know, we're all subject to, we see all these stories on the news lately of unaffordable Utah, and unfortunately that's the state of living in the Salt Lake Valley. So obviously to make homes as affordable as we can for West Jordan families, we've got to get as many lots on there as we can. We're not interested in changing the zoning map and getting a higher density. We just want to do what's currently planned for. So we think this project meets that criteria with the R18 zone. The West Jordan's low density single family designation calls for between 3.1 and 5.0 dwelling units per acre. Ours nets out, depending on how you calculate it, to about 3.5. So We are very similar to the surrounding neighborhoods, and we therefore feel like we're compatible to the surrounding properties and meet that criteria for a rezone. Could you go to the concept? Yep, this is a little bit closer. This is our preliminary concept, and we've incorporated some things that were suggestions to us from your staff, from both Larry and Mark and Nestor on the traffic side, and this is kind of where we're starting. We would extend that 1950 West from the north all the way through down to Gardner Lane, which obviously with that existing subdivision to the north, it was clearly intended that this would eventually tie in through there. We believe this will improve traffic flow and potentially reduce emergency response times. Obviously, traffic is always a concern when you add more homes, more traffic to the roads. And although it's not required at this point, we have already had Focus Engineering, that's who we've engaged to complete our engineering for us. They've completed a traffic study. They looked at the 3 intersections on Gardner Lane. They looked at 2200 and 1980 West, both of which currently have an acceptable level of service and will continue to have an acceptable level of service with the additional projected traffic flow from this subdivision. Redwood Road, I think you're all aware, is currently at a failing level of service, and I know that's already on the radar it's in the planning and hopefully financing stages. Once that light gets signalized, it will meet the current level of service and will also easily meet the level of service with the additional homes here. So again, we feel like with the improved traffic flow and access, that this meets that criteria as well. In terms of utilities, utilities are all available either in Gardner Lane or on 1950 West to the north. What else to say about utilities? I have met with, and I'm working with the Kirkman family, particularly Burnell Kirkman. They own the 11 acres, about 11 acres, I believe, directly to the west, on the west side of the canal. We've got a gentleman's agreement with the Kirkmans that we will, if the engineering works and he can get the permits that he needs, that we would grant them an easement and get that sewer under the canal if possible and allow him to essentially stub sewer into his property, which will obviously be of a future benefit to the Kirkman family. So we'll work towards doing that as well. So in terms of that criteria, we believe our project will improve the public services in the area. And lastly, is there any overlay district? There is no overlay district on this particular parcel. So I've already taken too much time, and I'm sure you're all anxious to go get to your caucus meetings. So again, we're just excited about an opportunity. It's a unique piece of property. It's a great location, and we're excited to hopefully be working in West Jordan again. So that's all I have.
Thank you. We'll invite you back up if we need to later on.
Great, thank you.
Representing this city is Mark Forsyth.
All right, thank you, Chairman. So just kind of going, oops. There we go. Sensitive keyboard. So I'll just kind of be really quick and talk about the surrounding area here. So this is kind of an interesting area of the city because you've got quite a mix of different residential uses. So to the north and south, you've got kind of the typical single-family homes on lots ranging from about 10,000 square feet to 13,000 square feet apiece. And then to the east, you've got something a little bit more different, a little more traditional in a rural residential area. So a lot of these lots have been around for a long time, and they're kind of a mix of not only single-family homes, but several duplexes and an apartment building. And then the lot sizes are considerably larger. You've got anything ranging from about 12,000 square feet to over 2 acres and just about everything in between. So, and then to the west, just along that west property boundary is the South Jordan Canal. And then just to the west of that is several acres of farmland, a few single-family homes, and a church. So, so yeah, there's quite a bit of variety. With this, we're being 8,000 square foot lot subdivision that would likely go through here. it's looking like it's pretty consistent with the neighborhoods to the south and the north. So this is on your screen here, you can just see the zoning map. As Mr. Gassman was saying, the surrounding zones to the north and south are R112 and R110 respectively. And then to the east is the rural residential, and then to the west is the A1. So again, the zoning map is even kind of a mix there as well. And so with the R18 zone included on the property, it's basically looking to kind of bridge that gap between the R110 to the south and the R112 to the north. And here's a future land use map, just showing the land use designations for the area. So yeah, this is designated for low density residential, which an R18 zone is appropriate. And so you can kind of see the land use designation is pretty similar to what's to the east and to the south. So eventually that area should be zoned to some of those zones. So this is the residential density table found in the general plan. As the applicant was saying, this is a low density designation with a range of 3.1 to 5 dwelling units per acre. They're proposing about 3.5, so kind of more on the low end of that range. And then the appropriate zones there, the R18, the R19, the R110, PC, and PRD. So the R18 is kind of more on the higher density side, but the actual density being proposed is kind of more towards the low side. So. Then we did a density study just to kind of take that point a little further. So you can kind of see here, on the left is the gross density and on the right is the net density. So the gross density is really just taking into account the number of dwelling units over the acreage of the entire zone without accounting for roads or non-residential uses, whereas the net density map is accounting for those. So you can kind of see a little bit of a similar result there. So the density for the proposed property is going to be a little bit on the high side, but it's kind of similar to what you can see on the north and south there. And then as far as utilities go, just kind of adding to the applicant's point, there's two connections. One is on that stub road to the south that has water, sewer, and storm lines in there already that can be stubbed to. And then to the south along Gardner Lane, there's a water and sewer line running along the north side of that road. So, then as far as water availability is concerned, we've had our utilities engineer look at that. And basically the ERCs or equivalent residential connections, they're entitled to are 88, and with them proposing 55 lots, they should be well within that. So with that and the analysis provided in the staff report, staff's recommending that the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to the City Council. And I can answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mark. This item is noticed for public hearing, so we will, excuse me. Do any of you have questions for staff?
Yeah, I've got one for Mark, and this kind of goes back to the ERCs. Can you just explain that a little bit more? Because I know in our pre-meeting we discussed that that was not kind of the legit formula or whatever because it was misdone.
Sure. And I'll try and explain this best I can, but so back in June of 2023, as part of the overall update to the general plan, the city adopted a new future land use map. So as part of that update, both to the general plan and the future land use map, there was a very high density designation that was taken out, but the density range were left intact. So basically the very high density became high, the high density became medium, medium became low. So a lot of that was, the names were just shifted, but the density ranges remain the same. However, the water master plan was adopted in 2022, a year earlier, and had not been updated as a result of that. So in our next go around, we're going to have to look at that ERC table and basically just shift those land uses up. So in other words, this property was always designated for 88 ERCs. It's just with the change in the name of the land use designation, it kind of messes up those calculations. So hopefully that makes sense.
Commissioner Roberts?
Can I ask a follow-up question to just clarify what you just said, which is, if I understand right, the name change just shifted the land use designation, and I'm not quite clear on which direction this property would have shifted, but based on the other calculation that using the different, what am I trying to say here? The other category that it would be in without the name shift, what would the ERC calculation look like?
Yeah, so if we hadn't, without the taking that discrepancy into account, they would have been entitled to 49 ERCs, which is far lower. So to clarify on the history, it was originally, and along with many other areas in the city, was originally designated as medium density residential. That was shifted down to low density residential.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we will now go to public hearing. I'd like to begin this portion of public hearing by making reference to 3 emails that were received. And I'm not going to read each one of them all the way through, but I will hopefully capture the main issues here. The first one is from Tricia Kingston. She is strongly opposed to this application. I would say primarily on the basis of what she calls cookie cutter houses. And she says, please don't take away what makes West Jordan so wonderful by turning everywhere we go into tiny houses and yards. Please keep it to the acre lots or larger and keep some open space and places for people with animals. The second email comes from January Kingston. This email is longer, but hopefully I'm capturing the main issues here. January Kingston is also opposed to this application. Her primary concerns would be traffic, overcrowding at Westvale Elementary School, water resources, and once again, cookie cutter houses on tiny lots. The third email comes from Emily Sosa. And Emily is in favor of this application. I believe she is the one that occupies that 1 acre lot on the south of this property. And she writes, I want to express my support in MacArthur Homes as our family takes this next step. They've been great individuals to work with. And before we invite people to the microphones, this document was up here on the dais when we came here. So if, I guess we'll invite you to the microphone now to explain this to us. As you come forward, please state your name, and you will have 3 minutes to address the commission.
So you're opening the public hearing, right?
Yes, it was open.
My name is Steve Losey. Can you hear me okay? Steve Losi. I own the 2 adjacent lots just to the east. Just looking at the proposal, it looks like 5 houses will be backed up to my 2 lots that I own. One is 1.25 acres. The other is 1 acre. And I'm fine with them doing it. However, I would like to see a barrier or a good fence between that section and our 1 acre lots or 1.25 acre lots, so that we have we don't have the kids climbing the fence or knocking the vinyl fence out and trying to get to our horses. So that's the only concern that I have, is with all these homes being here, there's bound to be a lot of young kids and stuff, and the liability that goes with that, and then not to mention that they could get hurt. So.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to address the commission?
My name is Jeff Bigelow. I've lived in the Park Point subdivision for 29 years. So I know very well what's happening. I do know John and MacArthur Homes quite well. I've worked with them for many years. I support what they're doing. I don't see that it's going to be an issue as far as our subdivision. The emails in question, I kind of laugh at. I'm in the facility and the subdivision that was built by Perry Homes. Those lots that I am on is an 8,000 square foot lot. They gave many different choices for housing. And so if you go through the subdivision of Park Point, which used to be previously Perry or Ivory Homes, Raspberry Place, the homes are nice, the lots are nice. There's no cookie cutter. Mine's a first time home buyer. And I think with what MacArthur Homes is doing is going to enhance my neighborhood. It's going to increase the value of our homes that are right there. Yes, it's not going to be a dinosaur park that I wanted, but it's going to be a nice addition to our neighborhood. The neighbors that I know that have lived there for many years, like myself, are in favor of it. I haven't heard anybody opposed to it in any way or in any shape with regard to what's going on. It'll also give me quicker access to the church, which is right there, so I can go through the back of my subdivision on Sundays. So I'm grateful for that, so thank you. But as far as the concerns, I know with expansion and growth is always going to come some people with vying opinions because it's taking away open space. This piece of property has been there for years. I've seen it the whole time I've lived there. And I've seen it go from cattle to horses. I grew up on a cattle ranch in eastern Utah. I know the value of open space, but I also know that with open land like this comes growth. West Jordan has an opportunity to put a good phase of homes in there. I know the quality of homes that MacArthur puts in, as I've worked with them intimately for many years. And many of them I've known for MacArthur for 20 to 30 years. So I support what's going on. I asked the board and the city to approve it and know that you're going to get a good foundation for our subdivision to continue to grow and build and move forward in a new phase. And I don't feel it's going to be any detriment to what is going on right now or any inclamities to the neighborhood at all in any way. So from my standpoint, being a neighbor for 25 years, 29 now, I support MacArthur Homes and what they're doing.
Thank you, sir.
I'm Bernell Kirkman. My family still owns the property to the west side of the canal. And I'd like to echo the previous gentleman with regard to MacArthur Homes. I'm a contractor, an excavating contractor as well. And we've worked with MacArthur in the past and have done nothing but accolades for their work. And being an adjacent property owner, we're concerned that what goes in there enhances the value of the neighborhood. So I'd just like to echo the previous guy.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkman. Others?
Much shorter, sorry.
You can pull those down towards your mouth if you like. Thank
My
you.
name is Jennifer Sorensen, and I live on the second to last house on 1950 West on the south end. And we bought the house there three and a half years ago, knowing that probably would happen to the property that we're talking about. So we knew this would probably happen, and I do to support this happening because yes, it does help West Jordan. My biggest concern and my fears came to light Friday night because we had a car chase come through our neighborhood. And normally people just get confused because it's just windy, windy streets. My biggest fear, they were able to catch the two turkeys because of the windy streets. It was a Unified and West Jordan issue. My biggest concern is that straight street going through from Sugar Factory to Gardner Lane. And I know that it turns a bit, and we are lucky enough to have speed bumps that help slow down on 1950 West. But I know this will go forth and go through, I understand that. But as someone who lives right there on that main 1950, is that it literally is just a straight shot, and it's just going to be, you know, word gets out with all the kids and the teenagers that will happen when these new homes come in that, hey, here's a straight street that gets you out of the way. If we could work with the streets department, I don't know if this is already set in stone, that this is what the map will be for that 1950 West Street, but it is a huge concern for all of us on 1950 West, is especially after Friday night with what happened, that, you know, here's the biggest fear that's not happened in 3.5 years, and it happens just before this meeting, that here would be something where they would have been able to literally, they were flying down the street to be able to have that straight away. If there's anything we can do to maybe change it, make it a wibbly wobbly, I don't know what it's called. But that is our biggest concern, at least that I know of in talking to my neighbors that live on 1950 West, is that straight street. If you could take that into consideration, how to fix that issue for us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anybody else in the audience?
Hi, I am Heather Pearson Moore. Grew up here, and it's hard for me, I guess, to see this have changes made, but my mom died, and then 3 years later, my dad died, and my brother was maybe going to farm it, and then he just passed away last year. So we were faced with a really big decision, trying to figure out what was best for our family and for the community. And with the development in West Jordan, we felt like this was the right thing to do. We interviewed and researched so many developers. I lost count. Both my husband and I think I can speak for my sister and her husband, really felt confident and felt like we were making the right decision going with John Gassman. We looked at a lot of the work that he did. It was quality. It was, anyway, he's been really good to work with. Any concern that we have, he does things in a timely manner, taking care and concern of any issue or questions that have come up. And anyway, I wanted to express my appreciation for people who have echoed that tonight. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, do we have people online? If you're online, raise your hand, please. If you're online, raise your hand, please. Okay, there appears to be nobody online. All right, public hearing is now closed, and we will now have debate by the commissioners. Commissioner Gonzalez.
I just had a quick question for staff. In one of the emails that was read through, there was concerns about the elementary school. Can you show us where that is to where the site is?
Yeah, so I don't have it on the map here. Well, let's see. Maybe I can go back here. There it is. Yeah, so if you see there, it's just right next to the golf course on Gardner Lane and 2200 West. There we go.
And the folks that just spoke to us, one of the concerns was for a fence protecting or dividing the property. Mark, can you have any comment about that or
Yeah, so the item before you tonight is for a rezone of the property. So right now we're really just looking at the entitlements as far as density and that sort of thing. So if and when the rezone is approved by the city council, the applicant will need to come back to the planning commission for a preliminary subdivision review. At that time, we're getting more into the subdivision design and whether or not that's in compliance with city ordinances. Now, there is an ordinance in city code that does talk about putting in walls or fences along between more intensive uses. So, for instance, if a new development is coming in that's next to a less intensive development, the Planning Commission has the authority to either require or waive a wall or a fence or some sort of barrier there. So, so at that time, we would look at that.
so would the traffic calming be done at that same time?
They would, yes. Yeah. Okay. So we, our traffic engineer looks at that during the preliminary subdivision review. And so, yeah, traffic calming is a big part of that.
We used to put in speed bumps, but then you guys came up with a fancy name for these things that stick out in the road.
Yeah, so that's part of our traffic calming method. So rather than just doing, speed tables is what they're referred to everywhere, which is what we used to do. Now there's kind of more of a variety of different methods that can be used. So there can be bulb outs, there can be, alternating street patterns, things like that. There's a long list, but yes.
Okay. Commissioner Thomas?
If there's no other comments, I'll go ahead and make the motion. Can you bring that up? Also, I just wanted to make a comment. Steve Pearson was a very good friend of mine, and all he talked about is his cows. So I've known him for quite a few years, and he was a pretty good guy. And then one other comment before I make the motion. The person who was concerned about the wall, I would actually just start talking to the developer if this gets approved by the city council and just be a little proactive on that. Most of the time, if you're that way and you communicate with the developer, you can usually work things out really well anyway. But anyway, that's just my comment. So with that, based on the information and findings set forth in the staff report, and upon the evidence and explanations received today, I move the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to the City Council to rezone the parcels comprising of 16.36 acres located at 1996 and 1998 West Gardner Lane from an A1 zone agricultural 1 acre lot to an R1C zone single family dwelling 8,000 square foot lot.
Commissioner Hollingsworth?
Could we amend that to be 1996 and 1986?
And also R18.
That's fine.
Okay. Commissioner Roberts?
I'll second that motion.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously.
Does somebody wish to make, Commissioner Thomas?
I'll do my usual. I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
Thank you. We are adjourned. Thank you all for being here tonight. We appreciate it.